As Norma Desmond said, I am big. It's the pictures that got small. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is the website you should visit if you want to learn more about us and our programming, including TFG Unbuttoned, our Tuesday podcast. Everything's available on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcast, you name it, except the Focus Group on Wednesdays is also available on YouTube and Facebook Live, and that drops on Wednesdays. So there you go. Welcome to the show. Mr. Bennett, as I said at the beginning in the tease, I teased Norma Desmond is from the movie Sunset Boulevard, and she played a aging silent film diva, and William Holden ends up at her house the whole bit. Love the movie. I am big. It's the pictures that got small. And I did that because later in the broadcast we have joining us Ben Modell of Undercrank Productions, and he is going to be talking to us about the incredible world of silent film and why it should be part of your film experience if you are a big cinema fan. And he's a fountain of knowledge, so it's going to be a fun conversation.
Didn't the movie studio just want her car?
Yes, the Frascata Borghini. I forget that it was some Italian hand-built car.
My friend Steve Dilworth says all you need to know about Sunset Boulevard is they wanted her car.
They did, because there's a scene where they go to the lot. She's working on some screenplay that she has him doing. It's what is it? Salome, yeah. And she wanted to have Cecil B. DeMille because he shows up in the movie. She wanted to have him directed, and she pulls up and she goes, "Hello," and everybody welcomes her. And William Holding's sitting out by the car with the chauffeur, Max, who happens to be a famous director. And they're like, "Hey, that's the car. Mr. Sullivan's office was calling her something because forget the car." Leave her alone. She made this studio. Anyway, as you can tell, Sunset Boulevard is one of my favorites. And I guess Tim's too. You've seen it a few times, right?
I've seen it a few times. There's a scene in there where she talks about oil wells, pumping. She's kicking her leg up.
And she has a little cigarette holder thing that she's doing.
I tried to use that for our imaging back in the day when we were on Sirius, and the levels just weren't there. We couldn't get the levels up high enough. But that was going to be one of our clips that we used for our imaging. I miss those imaging clips. Those were kind of fun.
You know, Tim, we had some pretty great folks to work with imaging. Of course, the imaging is the music and the sound stuff you hear at the beginning of the show. Great imaging happens when you have great source material. And when we set about to put imaging to our show, Tim and I collected things. We each collected different things, but the stuff we collected was hilarious.
Yeah, it was fun. But yeah, such as time. I don't know. I wondered about whether you could use that stuff again. I don't know what the rights are. You listen to some podcasts and they'll play Rolling Stones song, which you're not allowed to do.
For how long do they play it though?
Well, I was wondering that because I think under 10 seconds you're okay, or under 7 seconds. But it's got to be almost impossible to regulate now. I mean, there's everybody who has a microphone's doing a podcast, right?
Well, Tim, you and I ran afoul of the copyright police when we started to use some of our original imaging on YouTube specifically.
All the time. We got shut down every week. We got shut down
for
using stuff we had permission to use even.
Yeah, I know.
Which was the other odd part. But it was frustrating. And you weren't also allowed to talk about the pandemic or Donald Trump. Remember that craziness?
If you said either word, if you said COVID-13, pandemic, or Donald, you somehow got a ding against you. Yeah,
it must have been whoever he had in the FCC.
Someone was doing it. Yeah. So hey, happy Pride!
Oh, there he is.
There's the Pride leprechaun.
I'd like you to wear a little top hat and a little green shamrock, perhaps.
That would one of those like they always draw the leprechaun with that little hat, like the Lucky Charms guy. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
They're magically delicious.
Pride. I don't know why you're not in the Pride parades. You could have been. This could have been a whole cottage industry. You could have had the Pride leprechaun that shows up at all the big Pride parades around the country, and there's a float and the whole deal. I think there's something there to it. You can throw out little gold coins.
Somehow we should
boxes
combine
of to exist underwear, things like this.
We should combine the Pride Leprechaun with one of your favorite vehicles on the road today, and that's the Oscar Mayer. Well, now it's called the Frankmobile, right? Because they changed the name or something. But imagine if the Pride Leprechaun showed up in the Wienermobile. I think there's something there, right?
Throwing out slices of bologna.
Or olive loaf. You take your pick.
Olive loaf, because nobody eats it anyway. It's like a fruitcake.
Did you have olive loaf as a kid?
Oh, yes. My father loved it. And, the best part was my mother would put it on Wonder Bread with mayonnaise. So, of course, by 12 o'clock, sitting with your wax paper lunch in a locker, no one cared about refrigeration. Nobody died of botulism. You had an egg salad sandwich that sat there all day in the locker, then you ate it, right? Nobody died.
In your Scooby-Doo lunchbox.
Right, with Hawaiian Punch or something in
it. Bob heard you and I talking about olive loaf on a show a couple weeks ago, and to my surprise, we're in the car. He's like, "Oh man, I love that olive loaf." And I was like,
well, he loves olives. I remember Bob loves olives and pickles.
Well, I like olives too, but I'm not sure that I would combine olives and bologna.
Have you had the olive loaf? Have you ever had it as a kid?
Yes.
I think you should consider getting some. Next time you're upstate, go to the deli, get some fresh sliced olive loaf, get yourself some either rye bread or some Wonder Bread, a little mayo, and take a wander back home.
If I really wanted to wander back home, I'd wander back to the days when my dad would be obsessed with liverwurst.
Oh yeah, with onion and mustard.
And I remember opening my lunchbox. I'm like, and all the kids are like, "No, we're not trading. We are not trading."
Someone had one the other day we were talking about was Spam. Spam and something else. But I used to love Spam too. Very salty now. I saw it on the counter and I thought I'm going to buy some. So I bought Spam during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was like eating tablespoons of salt.
Mm-hmm.
I got shocked at how salty it was.
I guess they use that for preservative purposes or something.
Yeah.
But
well,
I was shocked by the sodium content. So, hey, if you're new to the show, the way we work, we do what we do right now. We're having a little bit of catch-up chatter. We have a segment called Caught Our Eye or Caught My Eye. We bring some news items to each other's attention, usually different things. We're going to visit with our partner, Deep Discount, take a quick break, and then the rest of the show is going to be devoted to Ben Modell, Undercrank Productions, and silent film, which is going to be great. So without further ado, Mr. Bennett, what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
So this is a business story, and it's regarding Twitter and Ben & Jerry's. And we've all heard that since Elon Musk had purchased Twitter, things seem to have slid in the wrong way, I guess, if you're an investor. So Twitter's U.S. advertising revenue for the 5 weeks from April 1st, 2023, to the first week in May were down $88 million.
It's a lot.
Or 59% versus the year earlier. And Ben & Jerry's this week just announced that they no longer will buy paid advertising on Twitter. They said they're citing the increase in hate speech on the platform. And they're also calling on all their business partners to do the same, which is interesting. So they said that hate speech is up dramatically while content moderation has become all but non-existent. This is according to the company's statement. It said, in addition to the changes on the platform that have led to an increase in hate speech, Musk himself has doubled down on dangerous anti-democratic lies and white nationalist hate speech. Ben & Jerry's said that a lot of the Twitter posts have been threatening and dangerous and not a good place for women, the gay community, Jewish and Muslim people, racial minorities, and many other groups. So they pulled out all of their spend on Twitter. Now, I know a number of companies have done this. And I wasn't surprised about Ben & Jerry's, other than it kind of took them a while. A lot of other companies pulled out long ago. Mm-hmm. And Ben & Jerry's said they're still going to try to connect with community on Twitter. They're just not doing any of the paid posts or advertising. And but that seems to be what's happening with Twitter. It's almost imploding on itself, isn't it?
Well, you have a mercurial new owner who paid $44 billion
Unbelievable,
for the platform?
Right? Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's now worth half that, if even so. Doesn't seem to care that the primary revenue generator for Twitter was always advertising. It wasn't, because it's the attention economy, right? Like I'm on Twitter because I want to be there, and these people drop their ads in. And you're right. The whole thing just doesn't make too much sense to me. Although, have you been on Twitter lately?
I have poked through a little bit, and And I actually did check a couple of brands to see
if they're
where
on
they've
there.
been. Like, for instance, Subaru used to be on there, and they seem to
I
have
haven't
not posted anything since October.
Nope.
They seem to have stopped, quietly stopped, which, again, a lot of people have.
You know,
But,
Tim, bringing up the autos category, like, have you seen GM on there?
No,
or any
no,
other?
GM announced they weren't on there. So that's why I said a lot of people announced earlier, and Ben and Jerry's has always been known for their activism and their pro social justice stance. So I was surprised it took them a while, but they made the announcement. It was in the New York Times, so that was what caught my
Good company
eye.
to do that. And I like their philosophy, and I like their ideals, and they stick to them. And this is a perfect example of that. Caught my eye this week was totally me. So meaning, this headline catches my eye for this precise reason. Cyclists wearing helmets. Now, this comes from us from a study in Australia. Cyclists wearing helmets are seen as less than human by drivers on the road. All right, so the puzzle, this is the thing here. A new study from Australia found that an alarming number of people in this survey, drivers, do not see cyclists as human, with those riding bicycles wearing helmets or safety vests seen as less human compared to those without. So if you have a helmet on, a high reflective vest, blinky, all this stuff that says, pay attention to me, I don't want to get hit by you, Mr. Car, you're seen as less than human. Wow. That one was surprising to me. They also did this other cross study that showed that if it was a person on like a mountain bike or a hybrid wearing a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, they were looked at more favorably than people wearing what I would wear when I go riding, for example, like a full kit and the whole bit. Now, I don't wear a lot of high-vis clothing. I have like gloves that have that built into it, and my socks do, and I have a little blinky light. I'm careful about balancing high-vis with just looking like a normal person. But this was kind of odd to me. But Tim, don't you think that and I could go into more of this, but that was the big takeaway, is the shock that they had when people would actually answer the question saying, whatever. You and I both know that when you're in a car, some drivers look at cyclists, joggers, and walkers as just obstacles. Why do I have to go around?
Nuisance.
Why do I have to? Yeah, a nuisance. Perfect word, Tim. Thank you. Why do I have to move to the, technically, if I'm on the road riding my bike and you want to pass me in your car, you're supposed to almost go a full length, right, the whole to the next side, then come back. I don't know. So that's what caught my eye.
Have you ever been scared riding that somebody was going to hit you?
Only twice, and once was down here in town, and I think I was on 9 going up towards Nyack and Piermont, where the Mario Cuomo Bridge is, and a car I literally almost felt a side view mirror like brush my hand, and the driver had swerved into a rather large side where I was riding safely. And then as I watched the car go on, and I'm like catching my breath and I'm stopping, it swerved to the other side, and I thought someone's on a phone. It was clearly an attention issue. And then upstate once, I was riding along on this deserted road, and a truck came up behind me, and it was like one of those trucks that are high off the ground with the stovepipe things.
Right.
This ridiculous
flag.
I don't know what it is. And he... Vroom, vroom. There's no one on the road. He could have passed anytime he wanted. And then when he did pass, he did something where I don't know if it's the oil or whatever, but they call it coal rolling, where all this smoke comes out of the car.
Oh, yeah.
So as it goes by, I'm engulfed.
Show you who was boss, John.
Yeah, I'm engulfed in a black cloud of smoke. And as it starts to clear and he pulls away, I see someone like a hand, like a fist.
Give me the finger.
Out of the passenger side. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, what does that? The flip side of that is the funniest thing I've ever had happen to me on a bike was upstate years ago. It was Halloween, and I was taking a bike ride, and it was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and a VW Golf, or GT, comes riding up slowly. It gives me plenty of room. As they go by, it moves ahead, and then it starts to go back to the lane, and then out of the passenger window comes a head just slowly coming out, and the guy was wearing one of those masks from like Scream or one of the Halloween movies or something, or Jason. It was like that droopy face thing, and it just looks at me, and then he slowly pulls back in, and the car just was not too... They kept close to me. I howled with laughter. I waved. I'm laughing my ass because it was such a funny, unscary thing to do. But it was just like, happy Halloween.
I always wanted to ride by when I see the guys like you on the bikes and get close. If I'm in the passenger, I'd crack their asses.
Oh, you mean through the spandex, right?
Sure. If you get close enough, reach out and smack them in a nice way. Yeah,
But,
it's people are crazy. I even know when I used to ride my mountain bike and be in bike lanes, even pedestrians or runners would refuse to move for the bikes, which would drive me crazy. And I would just go full steam ahead. I'll run you over. Do you want to walk in the way? Guess what?
Mr. Bennett, I'll run you over.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I don't know. I find that aggravating when people see you coming at them, and particularly people that are walking 4 or 5 abreast in bike lanes or in lanes, and they see you coming the other way, right? What's the courteous thing to do? Is you
Move. Yeah.
Either way,
No.
and you would move as well. So, yeah, it's crazy. Well,
But there you go. So, 2 very different caught our eyes, which is typical of the segment. So as many of you know, Deep Discount is a partner of ours here on the Focus Group, and we would invite you to go to their site and shop by going to ourfocusgroupradio.com and clicking on the Deep Discount logo. Summer-wide, site-wide sale. One of our favorites because you can free range. It's books, TVs, video game. Obviously, TVs and movies are top of the heap, but they have a lot of other stuff there you can check out. And so with a site-wide sale in mind, Mr. Bennett, what did you pick as your choice this week?
I've talked about this before, and I had to double check. I was shocked. So I Love Lucy, the complete series, and anyone should have that. Now, I think for the first time in my life, I Love Lucy has not been on TV.
Yep.
Though I can find it on something like maybe Pluto or something. But, they always said that I Love Lucy was the only show that continuously ran since it started in 1951. You could always find it somewhere, but that seems to not be the case. But I had bought this. It's 33 discs. It's the complete series, which goes from 1951 up until 57. It also includes the seasons of the 3 seasons of the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, and it also has some of the other specials that they would do after they moved to Connecticut when they would have the movie stars come in. And I had bought it at the time, I remember, for about $150 through Deep Discount a few years ago. It is $35.62. I was screaming. So you should get this, John, because you and I talked about it. You tried to get it a couple times. It was out of stock. But
Tim, I was going to say, even before you began talking about this, that when you sent this to me last night, and I thought, oh, Tim's recommending the complete series again, which I love. And then I got a wind of the price.
Yeah, because when you and I looked before, it was $150. Then it was down around 90 something or 75. And I had bought one for one of our copywriters that we use, Jeff. I had bought him as a gift one year, and so I remember the price. But I was shocked that this is $35.62 for the DVDs for the 33 discs. So if you're a fan of I Love Lucy or know anyone who is, or that genre of TV, it's funny. I watched a couple the other day because I have the set. They were so smart in that you don't really ever know the time that these shows happen.
Who's president? What's going on, right?
Well, I looked at what I said to Richard. I said, this show is 70 years old, and the humor, people, you're still laughing, but they don't refer. Maybe there's sometimes they'll mention a president or something, or maybe a movie star, but you don't really know what time these were done, and they still hold up. The writing's fantastic. So anyway, I Love Lucy, the complete series, you can get at Deep Discount for $35.62. Unbelievable.
Yeah, count me as someone who's definitely ordering this today, because when I saw the price, I thought, how could I not own it? And you're right. I've grown up in a world where Lucy was always on a channel somewhere.
Yep.
And I'm dying to see them on DVD because they're gonna look great.
Yep.
I picked for mine. I went to Deep Discount, and they actually have a really robust and good LGBTQ section. So when you go, you could shop by category and go to the left, and there's LGBTQ. And up popped a movie that I really only saw once years ago when it came out. Stars Colin Firth and Julianne Moore. It's called A Single Man. It was directed by Tom Ford, fashion icon Tom Ford. It's a really, really beautiful story. Colin Firth plays a guy in probably late 40s, early 50s who loses, or his partner dies. And it's just this intricate, interesting little play that happens on screen. It's really a tenderly told story, really well done, and I just want to see it again. And at $13.63 for the Blu-ray, Happy Pride, says the leprechaun.
Would
Go
you
with
have,
a single
would you have
man.
seen this when it came out on screen, or did you watch it?
Tim, when this came out originally, you and I were on Sirius or just starting. It came out in 2009. I believe I saw it on DVD before. I didn't see it in the movie theater. I saw it as a DVD.
Yeah, I was curious about it because there's the new Indiana Jones movie coming out.
The Dial of Destiny.
Supposed to be the last one. And I think those, you often said this about a lot of the Star Wars
sequels,
but about the Star Wars pictures, you got to see those in a theater with all the surround sound.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about that. I'd like to see that this summer. So as John mentioned, Deep Discount's got a site-wide sale going on this summer. Be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com and click on the Deep Discount logo. Everything's on sale. So it's a great time to add to your collection or to get some gifts for that graduate or do some of your holiday shopping early. So head over there. You get there by going to our site, focusgroupradio.com. I picked I Love Lucy, the complete series, which you can get all 33 discs for $35.62. Unbelievable. And John picked a movie that he remembers and like to see again, LGBTQ themed. Would you say it's that? LGBTQ
Yes,
themed?
most certainly. Yeah.
A Single Man, and that's also available on Blu-ray for under $14.
And we forgot to mention
I forgot to mention the new release. Go ahead, John. Mention the new release.
It's John Wick, Chapter 4. If you're a Keanu Reeves fan, and I know a lot of John Wick fans, this film is being released. It's the fourth chapter in the hugely successful and acclaimed action film series. Assassin John Wick is gunning for the global crime consortium, the High Table. I like that name, the High Table. It's like Blofeld should be at the High Table, right? Wick challenges top member of the Marquis, Vincent de Gramont, Bill Skarsgård, okay, to a duel, but first he'll have to fight the requisite hordes of lethal enemies to achieve his goals. So this is John Wick Chapter 4, available on 4K, Ultra HD, Blu-ray, and DVD.
Cool. So again, head over to focusgroupradio.com and click on the Deep Discount logo and start shopping away. Mr. Nash, do you want to tell us who we have coming up after our break?
After our break, we have Ben Modell. He is with Undercrank Productions, his company. He is a silent film accompanist, historian, expert of all things silent film. Get ready to be educated. So we're going to join him right after the break.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett, focusgroupradio.com for all you need to know about us and the show, including TFG Unbuttoned, drops on Tuesdays. And without further ado, as we've been teasing all show long, we are now welcoming Ben Modell to the show. And this was an interview we conducted a few days ago, so let's go live. What do they used to say, Tim? Let's go to the videotape. Joining us now is Ben Modell. He is the president and producer at Undercrank Productions, his own distribution company, silent film historian, accompanist, and presenter of silent films. And that's why he's joining us today, because we think everyone needs a primer in some of the greatest cinema that's ever been made, and that would be silent film. So, Ben, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me back on Focus Group. Thanks.
All right, so Undercrank is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And why don't you tell us a bit about Undercrank and what you do?
Well, Undercrank Productions is a home video label. We started out, our first release was in June of 2013 on DVD, and as of last year, we now release everything on both Blu-ray and DVD. There are some distributors who have moved over to distributing on Blu-ray but dropped the DVD. And I've discovered that about 15% of sales are DVD still, and 85% are Blu-ray. So there's still plenty of people with older players who are not moving up to Blu-ray, which is totally fine. But basically, over the last 10 years, I've made it a point of looking for silent films that you probably haven't heard of undeservedly so, and doing quality releases of these films, working mainly with the Library of Congress. I have a co-branding deal with the Library of Congress, getting new 2K or HD scans of these undiscovered gems, scoring them, usually myself. And the other thing that's part of the workflow is that uh, the funding comes from fans. I did my first Kickstarter in 2012 when Kickstarter itself had only been around for 3 years. So it's a way of empowering the fans who think, why isn't this on DVD? Well, you can actually help make this happen. So we are releasing our 28th title in June, a pair of feature films starring Raymond Griffith, who's sort of Ronald Coleman, William Powell, David Niven of slapstick silent comedy. And in July, we'll have a disc out of a pair of restored Tom Mix films. But we've got many, many films, stars or directors or films themselves that were big hits in their original release that deserve to be seen. So we're making these things available to fill out the landscape beyond Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Lillian Gish,
the known knowns.
and yes, you've seen Metropolis and Sunrise and Steamboat Bill Jr., but how about Marcel Perez or Alice Howell or Marion Davies?
So Ben, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
As John introed you, what makes silent films interesting?
It's ironically because of what's missing. I mean, that's the initial turnoff, because silent film sounds like, oh, let's go to a party, but it's in a library, they had to call. I mean, this is what movies were for 30 years. And then they had to call it something else now that there was sound. Oh, there's no sound, so we'll call them silent film.
Right.
But it's actually because of the fact that there's no sound, there's no color, and the way that the filmmakers, even all the way back to the early teens, began leaving things out and showing things as suggestions that we then fill in with our imaginations. And it sounds like, oh, that's a lot of work, but actually it happens like this. You're not aware you're doing this. I do a show almost every year at a private school in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where we present Buster Keaton short to fourth graders. But also, if there's time, we do a separate assembly for kindergartners, and I show them a 10-minute Stan Laurel comedy. These are 5-year-olds who have no context for what they're seeing, and the reaction is instant. I have some YouTube video up on my channel of a segment from this film. You can hear these little kids screaming with laughter, and really, as soon as the first fade in happens, you're in. It's almost like a dream state, and it's something I call the silent film universe. There's almost this altered reality where you could, there are things you can do in a silent film that you can't do in a sound film or do in reality. And there's something about this bond that you have as a viewer with the film, again, that you're completely unaware is happening, that's so much more fun and engaging than you think it's going to be.
Right.
Yeah, so you just actually defused one of the big misnomers about silent film is that it's scary or it's old or you shouldn't watch it because of something, and yet it has stood the test of time and with some of the best performances ever, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I met somebody recently who I told him what I do, and he said, "If there's no sound, how can you tell what's going on?" And it's a legitimate question, but this is what, like I said, this is for 30 years. This is what movies were all over the planet, and films made in Japan and Russia could be shown here and understood, and they still are, and vice versa. You just had to change the intertitles into a different language, but it really was a universal language, not just because anywhere, regardless of your language, can understand it, but because there was the specifics that you would get in a sound film are removed. There is something about the common shared human experience that we all go through: falling in love, trying to get a job, looking for work, looking for a place to live, whatever it is that we all go through, and we fill in the rest with our right brain. I did a show 5 or 6 years ago in Jecheon, South Korea, and we showed The Freshman with Harold Lloyd at this Roaring Twenties, rah rah, going to college, playing on the football team comedy, and the subtitles were translated into Korean, and everybody understood the film. The laughs were identical in that audience of 3,000 people at an outdoor venue as they were to a show I do in the U.S. We all have the same kind of struggles and challenges and humor. So it really is something that anybody from age 5 to 100 anywhere on the planet can just get, because those things are missing. It just sounds like you're not going to understand it, but it's the complete opposite.
So this leads to I guess you're leading me to my next question. Did the silent films, did they cover the or tackle the social or moral issues of the day? In other
Some
words,
of
like
them
movies
did.
do now, or were they more just pure entertainment, or did they actually have I guess simply the social or moral issues of the day? Did they
Oh no,
tackle those
absolutely.
themes?
Certainly there are definitely in the 19 teens, there were definitely films like that. In particular, the films directed by Louis Weber, a pioneer, not only a pioneer woman filmmaker, but she was one of Universal's top directors. Her films like Shoes, Where Are My Children, The Blot, Hypocrites, all tackled social issues. There are films,
Hypocrites.
yeah, which is about it's about hypocrisy and purity of spirit, so those are films. There's a lot of films that tackled certain social issues either directly and head on, or sometimes they would just be hinted at. The films of Oscar Micheaux, a pioneering African American film director who made his films specifically to not only provide films for an African American audience, but to also for the purposes of education and empowerment. So, and this happened maybe a little less so in the 1920s, when the country was on an upswing mood-wise, having won, the First World War and having come out of a pandemic, as are we all right now, and with prohibition, there was maybe a little less of that sort of thing. But certainly in the teens, you certainly saw that the serials that we always think of as women tied to train tracks and dangling off a cliff, actually, for a lot of the serials, the women were the action heroes. They were the Indiana Joneses of rescuing other people, running around on tops of moving trains and stuff like that. So there were films like that throughout the silent film era.
All right, let's get into some titles that Undercrank actually has. And by the way, our partner here on the focus group, Deep Discount, and our other partner is ccvideo.com, Critics' Choice Video. They are running a sale in June on all of the Undercrank titles to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Undercrank Productions. So you sent me a couple of box art. I love the box art for some of these titles. This one here is Xander the Great. I know the name Marion Davies. This is an unknown title to me. Is this relatively new to the Undercrank library?
Yes, we released this last year. It's a project that was kickstarted by a friend of mine, Edward LaRusso. He and I seem to take turns kickstarting releases of the Marion Davies silents made before 1928. I mean, they're all released through Undercrank, but we take turns. Xander is a film that's been preserved, that exists. Pretty much all of Marion Davies' silent films and her sound films survived because William Randolph Hearst made sure he had prints of all the films he produced and released under the Cosmopolitan Productions banner, whether they were Marion Davies pictures or made by other directors. And Marion Davies held on to those films, and in the 1950s, I think, donated all of her nitrate 35 millimeter prints to the Library of Congress. So it's thanks to Marion that we have these. So Xander the Great was scanned from an original 35 millimeter nitrate print with its original tinting reinstated.
Wow.
The legend, there are two legends with Marion Davies, unfortunately. One is that she's Susan Alexander Cain in Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I was going to ask
which
about
she
that.
is totally not. Susan Alexander is based on 3 different women, one of whom is a woman named Garner Walska, I think, who's sort of a precursor to Florence Foster Jenkins.
Oh my God!
Who was
Yeah,
a less than talented opera singer whose career was bankrolled
played by Meryl Streep
by somebody with a lot of money. So often when Ed or I kickstart one of these things, people will comment, "Oh, can she act?" And because of that confusion, it's the complete opposite. And the other thing is that for those people who know something about Marion Davies' career, it's that, William Randolph Hearst kept putting her into these stuffy costume dramas that were just not that interesting, which is not the case. A lot of them are costume pictures, but they're extremely well made. And her acting talent is the complete opposite of what everybody thinks it might be. She's a very talented actress, mimic, and comedian. And in many of her films, there are moments where her character, usually who is kind of flying the plane in terms of the plot, has to make a decision, and the director will go to a medium close-up, and you'll see her not in an indicating way like this, but you can tell what she's thinking, and you watch her character think things through and make a decision and move on. And so she's, her work and her life is ripe for rediscovery. There's a wonderful new biography out called Captain of Her Soul, written by Laura Gabrielle. And so it's come out, it was published last fall. Between that, we now have, through Undercrank Productions, 6 of Marion Davies' silent films out in gorgeous restorations, ripe for rediscovery.
So she's definitely one that somebody, if they want to dive into this, Marion Davies and some of the films that Undercrank has that she's in, all the titles would be great. Now, this next one, I love this. This is another Marion Davies film.
Yes.
Beverly of Graustark.
Beverly of Graustark, yeah. So, first of all, thanks for the kind words about the box design. All of our products and releases are designed by Marlene Weissman, who she's been a friend and a collaborator for many years, even before I started doing DVDs and Blu-rays. She had done the graphic design for the Silent Clowns film series brochures. But in the 90s, she had worked on SNL doing product designs and logos. So things like Super Colon Blow and the Wayne's World logo are her handiwork as well. But Beverly of Graustark was actually based on a novel from around the turn of the century. And it's basically a one of those Prince and the Pauper kind of stories where it's 2 people who look the same switch places, which has been done many, many times and spoofed in The History of the World Part 1. And The Great Dictator with Charlie Chaplin is based on this idea. The difference here is that in adapting this film, scenarist Agnes Christine Johnson flips it, and Marion Davies' character winds up doubling for her male cousin Oscar, played by a character actor named Creighton Hale, who, oddly enough, really does look like Marion Davies. And so she takes his place as Prince Oscar, who is about to ascend the throne. And there's a whole thing where Antonio Moreno becomes his bodyguard, and they fall for each other. But there's all this sort of gender comedy, and it's brilliantly made. It's really funny, and she's charming, and it's just a fun movie.
How long is the film run?
About 75 minutes.
Yeah, so I was wondering about that. Okay, so then you have some new titles that you mentioned this at the top of the interview.
Yeah.
Tom Mix. I've heard of Tom Mix.
Right.
This is a whole new thing to me. So this is coming out in July.
This will be out in July. And Tom Mix, like you, many people know the name Tom Mix. Everyone's heard of Tom Mix. People's parents or grandparents know the radio show that bore his name, but he was not on it at all. So he's known, but his films are not. And that's partially because the home video industry has never really been taken seriously silent westerns.
Well,
so
yeah,
for whatever reason, I'll leave it to the folks at those distributors to explain why. But most theater owners would count on a Western to sell tickets. They were all, the films ran about an hour or less. You didn't have a 2 hour big mega production that you could only have 4 or 5 shows a day. You could have your 6 shows a day. People love these films. And Tom Mix is just he made 83 silent feature films from
that's a lot.
1998 to
That's a
the
lot
end,
for an actor.
and most of them are missing.
Wow.
He was making 6 films a year, basically. So the one thing you knew when you were sitting in a theater watching Tom Mix is that in 2 months there'd be another one out. And Sky High is on the National Film Registry, I think largely because it kind of co-stars the Grand Canyon. I would say at least half to 2/3 of the film is filmed on location at the Grand Canyon. So all the footage of Tom Mix and the young woman he's trying to protect or take care of, and the bad guys riding horses around and scrambling up and down. It's not faked in the studio. It's the Grand Canyon. And there's a whole sequence where there's aerial footage, which, according to the intertitles, is the first aerial footage ever taken of the Grand Canyon. So, but he's like I said, a winning personality. Pretty much did all of his own stunts. And again, ripe for rediscovery.
Excellent.
So we're very happy to have this out. And the other film on this disc, The Big Diamond Robbery, has not been seen by anyone since 1929. It was his last silent, and no one has seen it since. And it's a beautiful restoration that we've done. And these both just aired on TCM.
Ben, were these films missing because the studios just did not realize the value of them, or are they just were at private collections or something and they just have disappeared? I mean, when you mentioned so many of those films are missing, were they not properly archived then?
No, they weren't. But until maybe half a century ago, movies, there was no resale or rerun entity or idea for film. Films were ephemera. They played your local theater and went the route around the country, and then those prints went back to the vaults. Sometimes they didn't come back at all. I mean, there's a lot of silent film that turns up every year somewhere in the extremities of planet Earth because the films played in, there's a lot of American silent film that survives only.
So print was sent somewhere.
At the Czech Film Archive, because the films were sent there.
Czechoslovakia.
And it was the end of the run. And why send it back? It's cheaper to hang on to it. No one's going to miss it. And so, this is why the idea of film preservation and showing the films again.
I guess it's relatively new, right?
It kind of is. It really wasn't until the 1950s and 60s, when silent film had its first real renaissance, that people started looking for the films. And even at that point, Buster Keaton was pretty sure most of his films were lost.
Wow.
And a whole cachet of them turned up in a gardening shed at his old house when James Mason bought Buster's old house, went in and said, "What are these cans of films doing here?"
Oh my gosh.
So nobody really thought of it that way. And so if there were studio holdings on Tom Mix films, because he worked for William Fox up till really 1929, there were a lot of his films there in a vault that went up in a very famous vault fire.
Because of the chemicals,
Fox,
right?
I think 1939. Yeah. And so a lot of Fox product is just gone. Some of it survives in prints at the Museum of Modern Art's vaults. Sky High turned up, a guy named Gary Locker turned it up in the early 1970s, somewhere, I think, in Arizona, behind a building, and got it preserved by the AFI, and now it's at the Library of Congress. And the Big Diamond Robbery, we combined a print that was preserved by the Library of Congress with a nitrate print with French titles in the collection of lobster films. Nobody thought to save these things that someone would look at them again.
It's like a big detective game you got to play.
It really is. I mean, we're finding things everywhere. I mean, a study was done 10 years ago by the Library of Congress that determined that 70% of American-made feature-length silent films are lost. Now, every year, a couple of things will turn up. And luckily, these films were released in 16 millimeter in the late 1920s and during the 1930s for home rentals. Sort of like the recently defunct DVD Netflix. You could rent these movies.
Disc by mail. Yeah.
Right. You could rent these movies, watch them in your house because they were on safety film stock. It was safe. And then you would ship them back. And no one at the Kodascope Library or the Universal Show at Home Library thought, oh, we're preserving this for generations to come. They thought, oh, here's a way to make a quick buck on 16 millimeter film. And a lot of these films only survive, such as The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1923 with Lon Chaney, only survives because there are a few 16 millimeter prints from the 20s that exist. And the term I came up for this was accidentally preserved. And that's actually the title of the very first DVD release that we did. So they're out there in 16 millimeter copies turn up and 35 millimeter prints turn up in attics, basements, barns, flea markets every year in the U.S. and overseas.
And Undercrank Productions is the place to get them.
That's a good place to go. If it doesn't have Harold Lloyd in it or anybody super famous, but these are the movies people in the 1920s went to see while they were waiting for Charlie Chaplin or Douglas Fairbanks to make their next movie. They're not forgettable. They're just forgotten.
Right. Well, Ben, thanks for joining us. We've been talking to Ben Modell. He's a renowned silent film accompanist, historian, publisher, and presenter of silent films, and knows more than I think anybody in the world about
on planet Earth.
about I'm trying to catch up to some of my colleagues, but thank you. Yeah,
he founded a DVD label called Undercrank Productions that releases rare and lost silent films. We shared a couple of the titles with you today, and as we mentioned earlier, our friends at Deep Discount and Critics' Choice Video are running a sale, a label-wide sale, in honor of the 10th anniversary of Undercrank Productions. You can get there by going to focusgroupradio.com and click on either the Critics' Choice Video logo or the Deep Discount logo and find all the titles that are available through Undercrank Productions. Thanks for joining us again, Ben. And I'm a novice with these silent films, but I love the aspect of theater of the mind, as John always calls it. So I'm looking forward to learning more about these some of these titles. So again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. And theater of the mind, that's a great way to put it. I'm gonna use that going forward. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.